Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. The residential coffin slinger of Honkai Star Rail, Luocha, has arrived in the second half of patch 1.1. In today's video, we'll take a look at a full and comprehensive guide of Luocha's kit. Don't worry, you're not imagining things. Luocha is an imaginary character. He is one of the 3 imaginary element characters in this game, and he happens to be one of the 3 healers in this game. We'll be taking a look at everything I know about him, which includes his traces, energy management, recommended builds/rotations, recommended relics, light cones, Eidolons, and teams. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Now, in order to understand the way of the coffin, we must first realize that Luocha is an attack scaling healer. Simply put, the higher his attack stat is, the more he heals. Luocha's kit revolves around his talent, Cycle of Life. His talent has a mechanic called the Abyss Flower. When you have 2 stacks of his Abyss Flower, it creates a field over the entire battlefield. Then, when any of your characters damage an enemy while the field is active, that character will be healed, and all your other teammates will also be healed by a smaller amount. This field lasts for 2 turns. This is frankly an insane amount of healing, as literally any time you damage an enemy, you have a chunky main damage dealer heal and an AoE heal that heals the entire team. Considering you have a team of 4 and all of them can attack an enemy, and each time they attack, your entire party heals, well, I think you can start to see why I said it's an insane amount of healing. Let's say each of your characters attacks just 1 time per cycle. That means that you'll get 8 activations of his talent's heal. Using a reasonable baseline of stats, this means that each character will heal for well over 5,000 hit points over the 2-turn duration of this talent. Alright, so how do we actually get Abyss Flower stacks? There are 3 ways to do so. First, by using his skill, second, through his skill's auto heal, and third, by using his ultimate. These all provide 1 Abyss Flower each. And again, you need 2 Abyss Flowers in order for his talent to activate. Anyway, here are a few more important details to know. You cannot gain Abyss Flower stacks while his field is active. So that means that you have to use his skill or auto skill or ultimate while his field is inactive in order to gain Abyss Flowers. Follow-up attacks do activate his talent's healing, and finally, hitting multiple targets does not heal you for more. Up next is his skill, Prayer of Abyss Flower. Casting his skill is quite straightforward as he simply heals a target for 1 skill point. What's incredible about this heal though is that it heals for a ton. With the previous reasonable stats and build from earlier, his skill heals for a massive 3,927 hit points. To put this into perspective, my Zila only has around 2,800 hit points, and it also cleanses a debuff for good measure. His skill also comes with the added benefit of being able to be auto-casted. That's right, you heard me right, he can cast it automatically. He'll auto-cast his skill on an ally that has fallen under 50% HP from an enemy's attack, and this does not consume any skill points. This is an incredibly great emergency heal that will absolutely be appreciated in so many scenarios. Now this autocast has a 2-turn cooldown, so do keep that in mind. But wait, that's not all. His autocast even generates 30 energy as well. Yep, it's literally a free cast of the skill with all the benefits as long as any of your team members falls under 50% HP. And as mentioned earlier, both his skill and autocasted version of his skill generates an Abyss Flower for his talent. And lastly, we have his ultimate, Death Wish. His ultimate hits every enemy on the field and removes a buff from them. It generates an Abyss Flower and costs 100 energy. Honestly, this is the most straightforward part of his kit and requires little additional explanation. Luocha also has a basic attack that just damages the enemy, and his overall technique starts the battle with his talent's healing field already activated for 2 turns. For trace priority, I would personally prioritize healing and thus level up both his talent and his skill. I don't find his damage to be particularly impactful, so just level those up whenever you feel like it. Now that we have an understanding of his kit, let's talk about some recommendations I have and why. Let's take a look at a pure healing build. This build just tries to maximize the amount of healing that he outputs by maximizing his attack stat with attack percent boots, attack percent sphere, attack percent link rope, and an outgoing healing body. I'm making a lot of assumptions for this chart like level 8 traces, level 80, E0, S1 with a few substat rolls. Anyway, his skill heals with these assumptions a comically large 4,822 hit points with this pure healing build. This will pretty much overheal any non-pure HP build character by a large amount. Instead of this, I recommend a bit more utility with a speed and energy build. This build has an outgoing healing body, speed boots, attack sphere, and energy recharge rope. With this build, he's still healing for a massive 3,927 hit points with his skill, which is much more than enough, and his talent heals plenty as well. Speaking of this energy recharge build, it is a bit situational as well, so that's the perfect segue to talk about rotations and energy for Luocha. There is one rotation which I highly recommend optimizing for, which is basic attack, skill, and then ultimate, which I will be calling the BBS rotation. This is a 3-turn rotation which has an incredible 2/3 uptime on his talent while being skill point positive for the team. By now, many of us are aware of the basics of energy recharge, but a quick recap is that his basic attacks provide 20 energy, skills provide 30 energy, and his ultimate provides 5 energy. Also keep in mind that his autocast skill also provides 30 energy. This leads to 2 rotations that you'll often run into, and that I personally recommend targeting, with the first one being the BBS rotation, which you will need 33.33% or more energy recharge. And as I mentioned earlier, Luocha's auto heal also provides 30 energy. This means that in some scenarios, Luocha can get his ultimate in just 2 turns with 33.33% energy recharge. Now whether or not these rotations with his auto healed skill line up perfectly with his talent uptime is unfortunately a bit random depending on what the enemies do, where you are in your rotation, etc, etc. But having these reliable options is incredibly powerful. This chart is for if you are not using his signature light cone. And without his signature light cone, how do you achieve 33.3% energy recharge? Well, you'll need to equip an energy recharge rope, the 2-piece Von Wax, and a Super Imposition 2 post-op conversation light cone, which is unfortunately a gacha exclusive, but it being a 4-star light cone means that quite a few people will indeed have it as Super Imposition 2. Alternatively, you can equip a Super Imposition 4 post-op light cone, which will allow you to drop the 2-piece Von Wax for the Fleetless of the Ageless for more team attack. If you don't have a Super Imposition 2 post-op, that's okay because the ER rope will still allow for the following skill point neutral rotations to get your ultimate up sooner, and you can also just, use his skill more in order to get his talent up. But again, you will be skill point neutral or even negative with some of these rotations. Similarly, I have a chart for those of you who plan to get his signature light cone, Echoes of a Coffin. Echoes of a Coffin at Super Imposition 1 provides 3 energy for each enemy hit by Luocha for up to 9 energy per attack. To keep this simple, you only need an energy recharge rope with this because you generate 9 energy via this light cone in order to obtain the same recommended rotations. This allows Luocha to equip the Fleet of the Ageless as well to provide even more support for his team. So in summary, I have 4 recommended builds for you. All of these builds use these same main stat pieces, which are outgoing healing on the body, speed on the boots, attack on the sphere, and energy recharge on the rope. The first build is with his signature light cone as Super Imposition 1, Echoes of a Coffin. For the 2-piece set, I recommend the Fleet of the Ageless. The second build is with a Super Imposition 4 or 5 post-op conversation light cone and the 2-piece Fleet of the Ageless. This is similar to the above, but without the 12 speed from his signature light cone. The third build is if you have a Super Imposition 2 or 3 post-op conversation light cone. With a Super Imposition 2 to 3 post-op, you need the Von Wax to maintain the recommended rotation of BBS from above. This does drop the buff of the Fleet of the Ageless. And lastly, if you don't have the above options, it's still okay because he's still a very solid character. You're just sacrificing a bit of either talent uptime, skill point generation, or ultimate uptime, which is fine for most situations. For any other light cone, I probably recommend the Fleet of the Ageless overall. So yeah, these are the 4 builds that I recommend in order to maintain his BBS rotation. Okay, so we've already talked a lot about his relics in the previous section, but there's still a few more details worth going over. For 4-piece relics, I think the Passerby of Wandering Cloud is a good option. The free skill point can really help with the first couple of rotations for the team. The additional healing is of course welcome as well. Another interesting set is the Eagle of Twilight line, as this one defers his initial skill point generation for more skill points and breaking power in the long run, especially if you have the BBS rotation to spam his ultimate every 2 to 3 turns. For 2-piece relics, you pretty much just have the Von Wax and the Fleet of the Ageless, with the Von Wax being recommended with a specific setup earlier, which is with a Super Imposition 2 post-op Conversation Light Cone. And for any other build, I personally prefer the Fleet of the Ageless. For main stats, I recommend getting an outgoing healing body, speed boots to activate the passive of the 2-piece sets, an attack sphere, and an energy recharge link rope. For substats, I recommend attack percent, effect resistance, some flat attack is always nice for a bit more heals, and of course, break effect and some survivability stats like HP never hurt as well. Now I've basically already covered light cones with the build section, but let's run through this anyway. Obviously his best light cone is his signature light cone, Echoes of the Coffin at Super Imposition 1. All you need is an energy recharge rope to maintain the BBS rotation, and it provides 12 speed to the team when he uses his ultimate, and allows you to use the Fleet of the Ageless for more team buffs, a 5 slime at a 5 slime rating. Now the post-op Conversation as Super Imposition 4 or 5 is an excellent light cone for him, and is basically the same as a signature light cone, minus the 12 speed team buff, a stellar 4 slime rating. And finally, the post-op Conversation as Super Impositions 2 to 3 is also excellent, as you can maintain the BBS rotation with the Von Wax, but you do sacrifice the 8% team buff from the Fleet of the Ageless. Still a good 3.5 slime rating for me. Unfortunately, a Super Imposition 1 post-op Conversation doesn't really do much for Luocha, but it's likely that you'll get another one in the future to be able to bring up to Super Imposition 2 in order to maintain the BBS rotation. As for the other Harmony light cones, I've given them all my personal rating down below. The one that I think deserves a mention is Perfect Timing, as with one of Luocha's major traces, it's likely he'll be extremely resistant to effects landing on him, thus making him a much more reliable healer and cleanser. Next, let's talk about teams. Luocha will, simply put, do incredibly well on almost any team that enjoys having a healer, which is pretty much any team. However, the most obvious point aside being that one standout teammate with him is the follow-up damage queen herself, Clara, aka the Svarog Dispenser. While Luocha's talents field is active, it practically makes Clara invincible, since every time she does a counterattack, she heals herself, and the entire party. The synergy here is absolutely perfect, and will turn Clara into a ridiculous tanking machine that can dish out plenty of damage as well. Another team I personally like a lot that I find myself using is a Duo Quantum, Duo Imaginary team. Zila, Silver Wolf, Luocha, and Yukong will be an extremely powerful hyper carry Zila team, especially against enemies that have an imaginary weakness, but no quantum weakness, or even to a slightly lesser extent, vice versa. Another notable mention is his synergy with other follow-up attack characters like Jinyuan, Herta, and Himiko, as their follow-up attacks will all heal themselves and the entire team even more. Anyway, Luocha is just a great and flexible healer that will fit in honestly any team that needs a healer. Let's quickly go through his Eidolons. Eidolon 1 provides 20% attack to the whole party while his field is active. This makes him a solid damage buffer for your team on top of the healing he provides. Eidolon 2 basically shields the character you used his skill on if that character is at over 50% HP. With the previous reasonable build from earlier in this video, this leads to an 882 hit point shield. Eidolon 4 makes it so enemies deal 12% less damage while his field is active. In conjunction with his Eidolon 2, Luocha might be able to provide enough damage mitigation to where you can drop your preservation character in many scenarios. And lastly, his Eidolon 6 is the big one, which provides 20% all resistance shred while his field is active. This makes him an actually pretty solid damage amplifier as well, and might actually contend with some Harmony characters. So yeah, if you can't tell by now, I think Luocha is an incredible character, and his healing feels extremely potent. However, he is not without his strengths and weaknesses. Let's quickly go over some of those. Starting with his strengths, he heals a ton. Personally, I feel like he heals a lot more than even Natasha and Bailu. He has great time on his healing field with proper light cones and builds, and he even has an emergency single target heal with a low 2-turn cooldown. He breaks better than the other 2 healers since his ultimate actually hits the enemy. His skill has a cleanse and he himself has a high base chance to resist enemy statuses. He is easy to build as you do not need to worry about crit stats, and he is of the currently scarce imaginary element. He has AoE buff removal with his ultimate, which I believe is currently unique, and his healing field works with follow-up attacks. But he is of course not without weaknesses, with the biggest weakness, which is actually very important, being that he does not have an instant immediate AoE heal via an ultimate like Natasha and Bailu. This means that if your enemies chain together multiple scary attacks and his healing field isn't up, but you do have his ultimate, you can't interrupt them with Luocha's ultimate to heal your characters that are being damaged. However, because his field works when any member on your team attacks an enemy, if a damage dealing teammate has their ultimate available, they can actually use their ultimate to obtain a small but welcome full party heal in between enemy attacks. So I'm actually going to have to update these strengths really quick. He has no revive, unlike Bailu, and he needs specific gacha exclusive light cones to achieve his optimal rotations. He does very low damage, and finally he's squishy compared to other healers because he's built with attack instead of HP. Overall though, especially if you don't have Bailu, Luocha is an incredibly good character. At the moment, it's hard to go wrong with having healers, and Luocha is an absolute beast at healing your entire party. Do keep in mind though that I fully expect us to get more healers, whether it's 4-star rarity or 5-star rarity in the future, so you know, if you're getting by fine without a second healer, then you might want to consider just waiting for another one. Let me know what you think about Luocha down in the comments below, and if I've missed anything. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Win to Lose, signing out.